And then we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us for our first Campus Earth Month talk. And for Campus Earth Month, we're so excited to be celebrating with you. My name is Caroline Gamble, and I'm the Sustainability Specialist for the Office of Sustainability. And I'm really excited to hear our two interns talk today about Is Clean Energy Actually Clean? Will be presented by Elliot and Sarah, who are here alongside me. We're all pinned, so you'll be able to see us at all times. This talk is about clean energy, as you might have guessed. We're often told that the future is clean energy, but what actually goes into powering that future? This talk dives into the world of energy transition minerals, exploring the complex trade-offs between global sustainability goals and the environmental and social realities of the mining required to meet them. From policy shifts to community impacts, we question whether a truly clean energy future is possible and what it will take to get there. A little bit of space setting about our Zoom today. So I will be recording. So if that makes you uncomfortable, feel free to keep your camera off. We'll be posting this on our YouTube afterwards. So you're welcome to re-reference it. Or if you have any friends who missed it and want to watch it, they can view it there. We have a live transcript going. So you're able to follow along if that's something that you'd like to do. You can turn on the captions in your Zoom toolbar. We'll have Q&A at the end, so you can either type your questions in the chat and we'll wait to answer them until then, or you can wait for your questions until the very end. Part of Campus Earth Month is our grand prize giveaway. So the way to earn entries is by collecting code words. You'll be able to collect 5 code words today for joining us live. And for anyone on YouTube, you can earn 2 today. They will be presented throughout the presentation, either on a slide, typed in the chat, or said by presenters. So make sure you're paying attention for that. You'll keep track of all those code words and send them in one email to sustainability@tamu.edu by Earth Day, April 22nd by midnight. If you want to see all of the prize details, rules, and entry options, you can visit the link on the slide below. There's lots of great things to win this month. These are things that we picked out, hand selected, because they promote a sustainable lifestyle, something where you can get more engaged with the nature around you. So lots of really amazing prizes. I hope someone on this Zoom gets a prize. Another way to earn code words for our giveaway is at Campus Earth Day, which is next Wednesday from 10 to 1 on April 15th at Rudder Plaza. So be sure to come on out. Our interns will be there presenting about different sustainability topics. You will also get to see the Queen of Aggieland Reveille. Aggieland Mariachi will be performing, and there will be so many different campus partners, student organizations, and community partnerships that will be presenting about their sustainability impact. Coming up, we have 2 more Campus Earth Month talks this week. The next one is presented by Sawyer and Peyton and Isha, called Caring for What Can't Speak for Itself, Rights for Animals and Plants for Future Generations. This talk examines humanity's role in environmental stewardship and the moral consideration owed to plants, animals, and future generations, beings unable to communicate their needs and interests. Grounded in the belief that plants and animals have intrinsic value and that future generations deserve to experience the planet's beauty, this discussion challenges anthropocentric development and argues for more inclusive, ethical decision-making to protect the world we leave behind. Our last Campus Earth Month talk is this Friday at 3:30, presented by Ciara and Adele, called Biomimicry, Nature as Our Mentor. In this TED-style talk, we explore the science behind biomimicry, highlighting case studies of sustainable innovations inspired by natural systems and their role in advancing the circular economy. By shifting our perspective from learning about nature to learning from nature, this discussion reveals how natural models can provide a powerful blueprint for healing and sustaining our planet. So you'll register for these talks the same way you did this one via the link in our Instagram bio. So be sure to tune in to that. Lastly, I want to highlight our internships. So if you are interested in doing really cool educational and outreach initiatives like this talk today, be sure to apply for our Instagram, our internship using the QR code on the screen. We have 8 internships available every semester. It's on campus. All majors are welcome. We love having so many different perspectives and mindsets and skill sets on our team because sustainability is a group effort. We're so excited to have anyone on the team who is committed to creating a more sustainable Aggieland. It's only open to undergraduate students, and you'll apply by midnight on April 19th. I would now like to pass it over to Elliot and Sarah to talk about, is clean energy really clean?
Thank you, Caroline. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Almieri.
And I'm Elliot Lynn, and today we'll be diving into the question, is clean energy really clean?
And when most people hear the phrase clean energy, they usually picture something simple and hopeful. They usually think of wind turbines or solar panels and electric vehicles. And they picture a future that looks greener, healthier, and more responsible than the one we have now. And that image is not wrong. Clean energy is one of the most important tools we have for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and moving away from fossil fuels.
However, we want to bring up that clean isn't the same as CO2 emissions, or how it's usually defined. Clean energy still requires mining, extraction, labor, transportation, and processing. So we wanted to look into how clean labels aren't magical and how the materials dived into Earth come with environmental, political, and ethical costs that we often don't talk about.
So today we're not arguing against clean energy, and we're also not saying it's no better than fossil fuels. We're saying that the story is more complicated than it first appears, and if we really want a sustainable future, then we have to be honest about the trade-offs that come with building it.
So that brings us to this slide, which is really the heart of our talk. On the left side, there's the image of progress we're used to when we think of clean energy. And on the right, oh, and that represents innovation, lower emissions, and pollution, and also just an overall greener future.
But on the other side is the part that's much easier to ignore. That future depends on open pit mines, chemical processing, heavy water use, waste rock, and in some places, really dangerous labor conditions. So while the final product may look clean, the path to producing it is often much messier.
We're not saying that the image on the left is false. We just want to say that there's more to the picture. And when people hear clean energy, they can see more than just the product and the result on the left, but also the process on this and the source on the right.
To understand this better, here are the six main minerals sitting behind much of the clean energy transition.
The first one is cobalt, which is used in many lithium-ion batteries, especially in electric vehicles and electronics. The second is lithium, which has become one of the most recognized materials in the clean energy conversation because it is essential for rechargeable batteries. And the third is neodymium, which is a rare earth element used in strong magnets for wind turbines as well as electric motors.
The fourth is graphite, which is a major material used in battery anodes, which is the part of the battery where electricity starts flowing during use. And the fifth is nickel, which helps improve the performance and energy density of certain battery chemistries. And lastly, the sixth is manganese, which is often used alongside nickel and cobalt to improve battery safety and thermal stability.
We bring up these minerals because they're not just rocks in the earth, they're the foundation of technologies that people point to when they talk about a greener future. And putting all these images on these slides is our hope that these minerals become more than just names, but they're also images of what they look like, the mines they come from, and the technology they power. So the next question becomes, where did they come from, and what does extraction look like in real life?
Here are our code words. The two of them that will be on the slide are cobalt and lithium.
And now, we already said that these critical minerals are the materials that enable many low carbon technologies. And using this map, we want to emphasize that they're not evenly distributed around the globe. There are different minerals concentrated in different areas, and that makes critical minerals a political and economic subject globally, because any change in price or supply affects the entire global supply chain. And on the left here, we have examples of materials we just mentioned, like cobalt, lithium, graphite, and nickel, as well as examples of their primary suppliers, like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Australia, Chile, Argentina, and China and Indonesia.
And that matters because one form of dependency can easily be replaced by another. So past energy systems were heavily shaped by dependence on oil. Today's transition could create a different kind of dependence centered around critical minerals and the countries that control their mining or processing. And that kind of concentration leaves the transition more fragile than it appears to us, because a future built on a narrow set of suppliers brings its own pressures, which is why diversification and transparency matters so much here. One of the clearest ways to see the human side of this issue is through cobalt mining in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We chose to display this specific case because it takes the topic out of the abstract and makes it real. A lot of conversations about energy transition minerals stay at the level of charts, policies, and global demand. But the reality becomes much harder to ignore when actual people and communities come into the picture.
The DRC is the largest producer of cobalt in the world, which, as we mentioned, is crucial for everyday things like our phones or even electric vehicles. However, it is also associated with serious issues about corruption, unsafe labor conditions, and child labor. As we listed here, one EV battery requires 5 kilograms of cobalt, which is 5 to 10 days of work for a person, while the child labor side has over 40,000 children scrounging around for less than $2 a day. So we want to ask, is it still clean energy if it depends on mines with horrible conditions, such as these in the Democratic Republic of Congo? An example is the artisanal miner, picture on the right. And artisanal mining just means they're not officially hired by the mining company, but it's also just a way for the mining company to put off liability by claiming that the miners do it out of their own free will and choice. However, they actually have no real choice since the mine dominates so much of the area that they're living in. The quote that we have in the middle says, "Imagine an entire population of people who cannot survive without scrounging in hazardous conditions for $1 or $2 a day." There is no alternative here. The mines have taken over everything. And we just wanted to emphasize that the cobalt that we use so much in our phones and electric vehicles comes from places like these, where entire communities have been centered around it. And there are still serious concerns about the ethics of this entire operation.
Mhm. And this is exactly, specifically where the language around clean energy starts to feel incomplete. Because a product such as cobalt in the DRC can lower carbon emissions, but it still raises major concerns about how it was made. And that gap is exactly what makes this issue so important. Because progress on our climate means very little when the people supplying that progress are being overlooked, exploited, or even harmed in the process.
However, as we talked about at the beginning, clean energy is still different than fossil fuels. Fossil fuels create ongoing carbon emissions every single time that they're burned, and they are a major driver of climate change through these emissions. And clean energy technologies, even with all the mining and transportation demands, they still offer major climate benefits over time.
And what makes this conversation so important is that replacing fossil fuels does not erase harm, but it only changes the type of harm that we're dealing with. So, specifically with fossil fuels, the damage is closely tied to long-term emissions and air pollution. But with critical minerals, the damage can show up more locally through extraction, water depletion, biodiversity loss, waste generation, and exploitative labor.
We don't want this to just be a race for the lowest CO2 emissions. We want it to be a question of responsibility and accountability of what the clean label actually means. Are we willing to pay attention to the damage that happens long before energy reaches an outlet, battery, or power grid?
Another reason this topic matters so much is because it reaches far beyond the mining industry and strongly affects several different factors. And the first one I want to talk about is the economic realm. Because companies make major investments based on mineral access, price changes, supply chain security, and innovations that can reduce dependence on certain minerals while improving recycling systems. And it also affects policy in the political realm because governments are trying to secure these materials while also responding to climate goals and global competition.
In the environmental sector, land use and habitat loss is a major concern of clean technologies like solar panels or wind turbines. There's also the issue of water consumption, manufacturing and disposal, and overall taking care of the entire life cycle of technologies such as solar panels and turbines, from the plants they're manufactured in to the transportation of them to their sites. And the last sector of people is probably the most important one. Beyond the mining and processing workers we talked about in places like the Democratic Republic of Congo, these mines also influence the people living near them, as well as the processing facility as well. In addition, there are also many jobs lost in the fossil fuel industry as we transition away from that into clean energy. And those are situations that need to be carefully managed before we have entire communities that have lost their main source of income. On a more global scale, there are also countries that rely heavily on fossil fuel or mineral exports for their GDP and economic productivity. So we should really take into account how transitioning away from fossil fuels affects them, as well as our reliance on critical minerals affects them as well. So when we start pulling the thread, we realize that clean energy affects all parts of our world in some way, each of our own daily lives.
So you may be wondering, what do we do with all of this information? And what we think is that the first step is to stop treating the phrase clean energy as if it explains everything on its own, because it's definitely a helpful phrase, but it can also hide a lot. Clean energy should be judged not only by the emissions that it avoids, but also by the way its materials are sourced, the communities it affects, and the standards that are used throughout the whole entire supply chain from beginning to end.
The second step is more transparency and accountability. We think that governments and companies should be able to trace mineral supply chains and show how labor and environmental standards are or aren't being upheld. Recycling and reuse matter heavily too, because the more materials we recover from those already in circulation, the less pressure there is to rely on only new extraction.
And finally, we need to stay curious. New technology can move us forward, but it should never stop us from asking harder questions about who benefits, who pays the price, and what kind of future is actually being built.
So is clean energy really clean?
Our answer is not fully, at least not yet.
But that does not mean that clean energy is the wrong path. It just means that the path has to be more honest, more responsible, and more complete than the version we often hear and see.
A future powered by lower emissions still needs to answer for labor conditions, environmental damage, and the political pressures hidden behind its supply chains. Because the real goal is not a future that simply looks cleaner. It is one that has been built with more care, more honesty, and far fewer hidden costs. Thank you so much for listening.
We would be happy to take any questions now.
All right. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. I learned so much. And it looks like we already have our first question. The first is from Logan. It says, what kind of solutions do you think would be most effective? New technology, social progress, etc.
I can take this one. During my research, I was looking more into the policy side to answer the problems that we were researching about. And I found that in Europe, there's already been policies that have been passed and into the legislature. One of them is called the EU Battery Regulation, and it basically just adds due diligence and more focus into the numbers of the carbon footprint all across Europe, and it puts sort of mandates on the recycling of specific companies and corporations.
Yeah, I really agree on that. For the policy side, it's very important that there are the policies in place that support the development and implementation of the new technologies. And I think in the future, there will probably be further innovation in the field of technology just to be able to make them cleaner and maybe even the recycling process and really get more critical minerals from what we already have and not have to rely on mines such as the one we researched about in our studies.
Mhm. I think the next question is what surprised us most in our research. And I think, at least for me, was just how much of these critical minerals are condensed in all these places across the world. And I mean, I certainly never thought like deeply about where these products were coming from. And so being able to research this and figure out where exactly the battery in my phone is coming from all across the world and how it's being made through each step in the process was very interesting.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think another thing for me was I never really considered that there was more to like wind turbines and solar panels than just like the physical structures. I didn't really think about how there are trucks that are used to transport them and that there's factories that need to make them and how all of those still might have emissions too, even if the end result technology isn't like emitting during the process of making energy. Okay. I think the third question was if we think that there will ever be an 100% clean energy source developed in our lifetime. And I think my thoughts on that is probably not entirely, just because at least the way that we've started to see clean is that it kind of has to be balanced across um, its entire life cycle of emissions, but there are also so many more factors than just CO2 emissions. There's the people it affects, there's the pollution it may cause. And I think just from the way that you have to make energy and um, having to conserve it somehow, like the conservation of energy, there's probably no entire way to make the entire process completely clean in all manners, but I think we can get really, really close and try to minimize it as much as we can.
Does anyone have more questions? Okay, well, thank you everyone for, oh, sorry. Oh, we have another one. Okay, wonderful. What role do you think the US should play in this progress?
I think going back to the political realm a bit, the US has also noticed this and has also passed legislation regarding this field. One in specific was the Inflation Reduction Act, and it pushes for cleaner vehicle supply chains through sourcing rules. And that's definitely a great step forward. I think talking about this with more people and getting the word out about the term clean energy and what it actually means and the factors that go on behind the scenes, the more it's talked about, the more people will come up with ideas and be able to get towards that goal of 100%.
Yeah, and I think on the political side, to add on to that, the more people that are aware of how the entire process works means that there's more people available to advocate for the issue. And when we can get enough people together to advocate for a certain change, then we can be more effective in having that change implemented.
All right, next question. What can we do about it?
That's a great question. Locally, I think we can recycle, we can go out and vote, and we can talk about it and spread the word with our friends and family and people around us.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And although it seems a bit hard for all the global issues we talked about, and maybe even like issues in countries that we probably have never been to, I would say that because this is an issue that affects us where we are, just from like fossil fuel transition and how that influences gas prices, and even how clean energy production influences our utility bills, it is an issue that should matter to us because it does affect us. And because of that, I think that we all have the potential to be advocates for cleaner energy sources.
Thank y'all so much for that wonderful presentation and for everyone joining us today. And so many amazing questions. Thank y'all so much. We hope to see you on Wednesday for our next talk. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.